So, hi everybody, and welcome back to another episode of In Conversation With. If you're joining us on the Friday night over on the Azure Live Twitch.tv channel, then thanks so much for tuning in. Please do take part in the chat below, and don't forget to give the channel a follow. You get notified when more content goes live. That would be superb. Equally, if you're on the YouTube channel, you're catching this on a replay, thanks so much. Don't forget to give a like and subscribe. Really appreciate if you could do that. Okay, so my guest this week is a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft. She's a public speaker, she's a vlogger, a blogger, and a community leader. So she currently organises the fantastic Glasgow Azure user group. So on that note, my guest in conversation with this week is the one and only Sarah Lean. So, hiya Sarah, thanks so much for joining me. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me and for that fantastic introduction there, John.
Well, and I did it in one take, can you believe it? You know, I say to everybody, it's the joke time. It's when I fluff it all up. No, honestly, thanks so much for joining me. You know, I don't know if you've got wind to the kind of little videos that I'm putting together, but to have somebody of your stature on this show is absolutely fantastic. You know, I know we've obviously touched base over a few things over the last few months with the user groups and things. But I mean, I guess for those that are watching this, and I can't believe there are any people that are watching this that don't know who you are, I don't know if you want to give yourself a little bit of an introduction, elaborate on the intro, if you don't mind.
So as you said, I am a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft, which really means that I'm the kind of bridge between community and our engineering teams. So I try and fill that gap of answering questions and helping point people in the right direction of content, whether that be learning content or documentation. And if there isn't anything, then it's really my job to either try and write that or tell the right teams that there's something missing and they need to figure out and fill that gap. So that's kind of what my job is at Microsoft in a nutshell.
No,
and outside of
yeah.
that, oh.
No, carry on, Sarah. Sorry.
No, it's okay. And outside of that, obviously, as you said, I do a lot of community work, and that's really where I started, to be honest, in the community blogging and doing my videos and the user group. And that's how I led to getting this job at Microsoft through the activities I did in my spare time. So, yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think obviously that's where we first met, you know, going back a few months ago, obviously, you know, with the Welsh Azure user group, you running the Glasgow user group. I know you came on and gave me some fantastic advice, or me and the rest of the guys in the team that we're running in the Welsh Azure group. So thanks for that. And obviously, yeah, I mean, it's been quite interesting because obviously I've been following you now and the content you're putting back out into the community, obviously the team that you're currently working with, this cloud advocacy team. And I'm right in thinking that you're part of the IT ops team, essentially, within Microsoft. And there's a number of these kind of advocacy teams that cover various areas of Microsoft. I mean, it'd be really interesting if you can kind of explain to me what a day in the life of a cloud advocate is like, and you know how you know obviously without going into the details, I'm sure, but you know what does that involve in terms of, you know, you alluded to reaching out to the community, finding content, creating it if you need to, but you know I follow a number of the, you know, your colleagues in your team, and there is such fantastic content out there. I don't know if you just want to go over that and explain to people maybe how they can get involved and how they can feed back to you guys.
So I don't have a typical day. So my days all vary. Today, for example, was meeting day. So literally being in back-to-back meetings, either catch up people meetings or planning meetings about content that we're trying to get filmed. So it can be varied, my week, if we look at it that way. So I think yesterday I spent time actually within the Azure portal, demoing something, trying to figure out how to do something, recording that and then editing that for a video that's coming out in a couple of weeks' time. So there's various different things that I do. So, you know, creating that video content, potentially editing it. That's something that we do ourselves, a lot of us at the time, editing our own videos. So that adds on an extra layer of skill and an extra layer of time, as I'm sure you're used to this, John, creating videos. There's a lot of editing that can go into these. Lots of blooper reels. I'm saving up the blooper reels actually for a kind of end of the year video. There'll be lots of beeping out on that video, to be honest. There'll be lots of beeping out on that video.
I just delete mine. I just go in straight away. Oh, it's gone. It's gone. It's erased from history. It's the best way to be. But you're right, though. It's absolutely one of those things that I think, you know, under the current circumstances, I think think a lot of people have got themselves into a position where there's obviously a lot more time on their hands. They're, doing the kind of thing I'm doing, getting a nice little office set up and trying to put a little bit back to the community. But I mean, I know in following you, you've put out some great content, not necessarily on the Microsoft tech side of things, but on the setting up. How do you get started with creating this kind of content? I mean, have you got any kind of hints or tips around that and where people might want to start looking to do that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I've been on that journey, and it's been a journey that I started well before COVID and everything started, to be honest, John, because at the time I was just before COVID, I was starting to build up that home office and figure out how to do like soundboards, which is what that is behind me, and what microphone to use and stuff like that. So I've been sharing that back because lots of people have asked me about it, and how they go about it without breaking their budget and stuff like that. Because you could go crazy, you could absolutely go crazy with the home studio stuff, and I know you've found that out sometimes.
Yeah.
So I've just been sharing some of the tips that I do, some of the simple things that you can do. Like, for example, I don't know if you can see, but that's a window usually where the sun comes in. So I installed like a blackout blind just to make it better so I can control the light and it's much easier. So simple little things like that can actually make a big difference. I think that was something cheap. I measured myself, ordered online, fitted myself. Thankfully, my measurements were right. But it's those kind of things that can actually make a massive difference to, the quality of your webcam and the picture. Because if you can control the light inside your room, suddenly your webcam doesn't have to do that and can actually focus on giving you like a quality picture. So I've created some videos and blogs around some of that stuff, because you can go down a rat hole. I'm sure you've done it, John, as well yourself. You can research microphones.
I'm in there. Yeah, I'm in there.
You can research microphones, sound panels, whatever it may be, for hours and weeks on end and actually never get to a decision. So I've just shared some of my tips and consolidated the hours that I have spent reading up on it for other people, because I know that's not directly related to like Microsoft tech, but it's a part of interest when you look at potentially the community and the audience that I speak to and the people that I talk to. So yeah, I just want to share that back. And I've always had that mentality, John, about sharing back. I'm not one of these gatekeeper people that like, oh, I've learned something and I'm not going to tell you. So I'm an open book in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. I think you mentioned that rat hole there. So I think when you start looking at gear and you're right, it's so easy to kind of get caught in a little bit of a trap. But it's true. I mean, lots of people say if you're looking to start out, literally, you can just start out with the mobile phone, with the webcam that you've got on your laptop or maybe your desktop. And yeah, I think my problem is that when you start doing something, you see nice shiny technology and, I wonder if I could buy that little camera or this camera. And before you know it, you end up in, like you say, a little bit of a rabbit hole, I suppose, where you're trying to decide what tech should you buy next, what tech can you get away with not buying. But I think for me, from my point of view, I just had a little bit of fun with it. There's a little bit of spare cash floating around. Luckily, somehow I think I've just not been able to be dad's taxi driving across the UK with the kids. So that money I kind of invested a little bit, but I think it's probably kept me personally a little bit sane, I guess, under the circumstances, with something to focus on and just have a little bit of fun with. But no, like you say there, you're putting that information back out into the community, just so people can pick up those hints and tips around how to kind of set up these kind of environments and really get started. I suppose on that note, Sarah, what do you see being the key reason why people might want to turn to the community a little bit, maybe, and start maybe thinking about putting a little bit back? Because you mentioned they're not gatekeeping, anything you learn, put it back into the community. What does that mean for you, and what do you, get out of doing that kind of thing?
Well, my story is kind of unique, John, because I started the Glasgow Azure user group and someone from Microsoft came along and then saw the work I was doing. We just got chatting. He referred me for a job at Microsoft, and I actually got my first role at Microsoft through that connection. So that's just an example of one of the things that can happen when you interact with the community. You can get to know people, you can build on the connections. So, user groups are great places to share knowledge, but they're also a great place to share, and I want to say business cards. That's probably really old hat, but it's that way of building up that connection network. You never know who you're going to be talking to. You could be sitting next to the CEO of some company, and, they might might be looking for a job or whatever. So it's that part, it's that knowledge sharing and that community, that network building that you get from these community events. And I think they're invaluable for that. So yeah, you can always find someone that knows something. I think I've built up a network of people that know various different technologies, either from the presentations they've given or just meeting them and talking them to. So if I have a random question about something, I know who I can ping so for a favor and stuff like that. So it's just about that community. That's the best word of saying it. There really is a community spirit amongst a lot of the user groups that I have attended and organised as well, John.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, since COVID happened, obviously, I turned my attention a little bit more to doing a little bit more public facing. I think for years I was always internal, always speaking internally to teams, gemming their knowledge up and things like that. And it's probably fair to say I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. And I know I've spoken with colleagues about this as well, because it's like, I guess on the face of it, oh yeah, got on Twitter, set up a YouTube channel. It's all these things, I guess, traditionally we've all felt a bit like, yeah, I'm certainly me, not yourself, Sarah. Certainly I'm of that generation that would be like, well, yeah, that's a little bit probably, for the kids and that sort of thing. But having said that, as soon as I did it, it's like all of a sudden this little switch goes on in your brain. It's like everything you just mentioned there, the networking element, the friendships that you build up. I mean, which is a weird thing to say, I guess, at the minute, because we're all virtual. But yep. It very much is true. I think, putting that little bit of content back out to the community, building up that network of people that are in either IT professionals or something, in associated tech areas, just kind of broadens your horizons a little bit, I guess, is what I've got out of it. So, I mean, it's great to hear. Like I say, internally, I'm trying to get colleagues to kind of push a bit more content out and kind of get involved, because I think it's true what they say, the more you put in, the more you get out of it in lots of different ways. So I mean, on that note, Sarah, when we talk about community and giving back, clearly there's been quite an explosion of online content for the obvious reason, that we're kind of all locked in our houses at the moment. But at the same time, Microsoft themselves, with Satya's announcement about sort of that tech intensity, we seem to have, correlated that home, online thing that we're all doing at the moment with actually there's a lot of fantastic things coming out of Microsoft at the moment, and their ethos of how they're trying to empower, more businesses and more individuals to achieve more is fundamentally a huge tagline that Microsoft talk about. How does that translate to the individual? In your case, Sarah, how does that translate down to the raft of things that are going on? How do you stay on top of what should you need to know? What can you know? And just that sheer work-life balance with learning these things. What's that mean for you?
Yeah, it's hard. And I think, quoting Satya again, he's always said to not be a know-it-all, but a learn-it-all. So it's always about trying to pick up knowledge and find out where you're going. You don't need to necessarily know it all, but again, go back to your network. If you know someone that knows it, then you can kind of leverage them to help you. It is hard to figure out where to focus because there are so many great products. Just looking at the Azure suite, I think last time I kind of counted, or someone said a number, there's well over 200, right? So there's lots to play with, lots to try out, lots to figure out, but you definitely can't do all of it. And that's just Azure, because if you think about some of the other cloud products that we have, then the number's endless. For me, I still stay true to my roots. So, I was a sysadmin, an IT pro, an operations engineer, whatever you want to call it, when I was doing the work on-prem. And that's kind of where I stay. I still talk about servers. I still talk about storage, some networking. Trying to focus maybe on the hybrid story and the migration story a bit more to understand how organizations can not necessarily empty their data centers, but leverage that cloud to give them more power and more flexibility and reliability for some cases. So I'm focusing on that story. Obviously, hybrid kind of covers a lot of things. There's tons that you can actually weave into that story, but that's kind of where I stay. I stay not inside my comfort zone as such, but the place that makes me happy, the things that I can relate to and can actually start to translate into previous experience and future going, does that make sense?
No, it does. No, to be honest, it resonates massively with me as well, because it sounds like we are from very similar backgrounds. That, I mean, I call it the traditional route, I guess, maybe into IT, where you start off working for a company, you do a bit of help desk support, and you transition through then into working with various products and projects before you kind of get into this zone where you've got quite a lot of years worth of experience there working in that traditional operations role. So no, it does make perfect sense. And I think one of the things I'm finding a lot with at the moment is obviously every customer I deal with and speak to, obviously they're on this journey themselves, whether it be as a business or the individuals working for that business. And I guess we're kind of all in this very similar, area of, wow, look at all this fantastic technology. But unfortunately, we got to kind of roll it back a little bit and go, right, okay, where are we now and what do we want to achieve? So, I mean, to pick you up on that point of staying true to your roots, that's something that I try to do, and I suppose I get distracted by all the shiny technology too much, which if you look at it from the operations perspective now, we find we're talking about DevOps and we're talking about actually infrastructure as code, and then obviously putting all your monitoring and governance in place, again with all these what have traditionally been seen as developer tool sets like VS Code and obviously Git and Git repos. I mean, have you ventured off into that area at all at the moment, Sarah? And I suppose, do you have any hints towards people, the best ways to get started along that journey?
Yes, I will tackle this in two parts, John. I think people on a migration journey think that their migration journey has to end with, or there is an end point of their migration journey where they're using governance, they're using DevOps, they're using CI/CD, they're using all the automation, and that's the end goal. I think what a lot of them forget is that the cloud journey or the cloud adoption journey is actually one that will continue, and you start off small and then you build up. No, you don't have to start instantly when you move into, say, Azure with governance. You don't have to start off necessarily with CI/CD pipelines and infrastructure as code. Some of these come further down the line as you mature and you figure out where your skill sets are and what your problems are you're actually trying to solve. So that's one part of it. You need to understand where you are and not necessarily have to have everything on day one when you migrate to the cloud. I think that's one of the messages I try and dispel to customers. In terms of how I look at it and where I've went and going outside of that comfort zone, as you were saying, I have actually delved in the whole DevOps thing and figured out CI/CD pipelines and I did that with my blog, actually, John. So I did that as a production, or I'm going to say production, implementation, where my blog is all written in a platform called Grav, which is kind of JSON, YAML type file content management system. And it's sitting in a DevOps repo, goes through a pipeline, goes through a build process, some checks are built into it, and then it gets pushed to an Azure web app, which is in staging. And then if I approve it, it then goes into production. And that was my way of figuring out how to do it, because it's great going through a lab or one of the, a Microsoft Learn module, and you find out how to use it, and that's great, and you complete all that. But how do you actually apply that to a real world problem, something that breaks occasionally and something that you have to fix? Because these modules are all based on you making an implementation successful, right? But you and I know that that's not how technology works, and there are things that break just randomly because of nothing, or because of a random comma somewhere in the wrong line of code. So the blogging has helped me figure out how to use the DevOps kind of pipelines and DevOps tool as well. So I forced myself to learn that so that I would have my blog successful. And I think that's kind of where a lot of people should maybe think about it, not necessarily using the blog, but what problem have you got that you can solve with a bit of technology and make it that production environment for yourself? And then you can take those learnings into your job and actually put it into how you fix things within your organization as well.
That's another great tip there, in terms of you answered that in two parts. Essentially, for businesses looking to move into the cloud at the moment, they're looking at that, if you like, that traditional migration kind of process. Now, there's lots of people. There was a great, I think it was Jack Tracy said to me, rather than lift and shift, it was kind of lift and optimize. It was kind of that, don't think of it as just taking your resources where they are and how they're currently running and moving them directly into Azure. Of course you can, but then, use maybe one of those applications just to kind of prove that out and look at how you can optimize. And I suppose that word optimize means a lot of things for a lot of different people, and whether it be cost optimization, sort of efficiencies of running that particular application. And I guess that's, like you say, that's where those tool sets like Git and Azure DevOps pipelines can kind of come into play. I completely agree, because that's the journey that I've been on myself, and that's the journey I'm speaking with customers about, today and tomorrow and so on and so forth, until we all get it and we're all kind of happily working away in our optimized cloud environments. But I mean, just doing it, I think it takes that a little bit of focus, as an individual, to kind of realize that there are these new shiny technologies around, and I guess maybe, I don't want to use the term sitting on your laurels, but kind of staying in that traditional mindset that you are, an operations person, and you can kind of carry on working in maybe the traditional sense, jumping into GUIs and clicking around is great maybe for a small company, for a few servers, but it doesn't necessarily scale well. And the way I look at it is that those tools are there to kind of, exactly back to that tagline of help you achieve more, help you automate, help you a great term that I heard was you should always be looking to automate your way out of your own job. So anything that you do, look for a way to automate that. And then it's, logically it makes sense, but I guess it can be a little bit nervy, I guess, maybe for some people. How do you approach people when they come to you, sort of like, oh, all this automation stuff, it's gonna put me out of a job? Have you got any kind of words of wisdom that you might want to tell people if they're feeling like that?
I always try and say that's an opportunity to automate the bits that you don't like doing, right? I'm sure we've all done morning checks or checking log files and, all that kind of good stuff that has to be done, but is boring as hell, John, right? There's no other way to put it. So that's the opportunity to automate those tasks, the tasks you don't like doing, the tasks that take the time. And then you can actually get to play with the more shinier tech. You can start to plan the 5-year plan out. You can eventually actually look at what you're going to do with your Windows Server 2008 boxes, if you've still got them, and actually build that business case and show the organization how to do it, instead of spending time doing your morning checks or doing those tasks that you can automate. You don't necessarily need to automate everything, and it's definitely not going to automate you out of a job. I don't think there's a lot of things that still need to happen, manually by a person, that require that. So use the automation to take away the boring parts of your job, the monotonous parts of the job, and allow you more freedom to actually go and look at the projects and the tech that you want to do, and get that chance that we didn't necessarily have a few years ago, when the cloud really wasn't here for us.
No, absolutely. I think, that's great advice there. I think, I think that the key message I think I'm trying to get out here is that, whether you work in Microsoft or whether you're an individual working for a small business, an enterprise business, we're kind of all in it at the same time. We're all learning these technologies and trying to make the best out of it that we can for a business. But it's finding the right opportunity and trying to hone in on those particular technologies that are right for you and your business, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make here, I suppose. So I mean, looking, obviously you've talked a lot around, obviously where you currently work, how you're working at the moment, the tech areas that you've come from a traditional point of view, and where you're working now in the cloud. Are there any areas of the cloud that, as much as you might want to restrain yourself, but are piquing your interest? I know we had Ignite a couple of weeks back now, and there were some superb announcements, some really exciting announcements. Where do you sit with that, Sarah? Have you got anything on the horizon that you like to dip into?
I have got lots, honestly, John. Like the to-do list, massive, and that's not even the proper one. There's probably more that I've missed off on that. I think I'm just excited about some of the feature announcements that we've had on top of existing products. And, I don't think it's any surprise if anyone's ever watched me before, but Azure Migrate is still one of my favorite products. It's the capabilities of it and where the team are taking it, and the continual adding of features and functionality to it still excite me. Still got a plan. One of those to-do list items is to go rebuild my Azure Migrate lab and have another look at it and update all my videos and stuff like that. So again, staying true to that, but it's a product that I've used tons of times before, John. And I think you've done various different tutorials on it as well. So but it continually adds on new features. So that's where my interest gets piqued on the fact that something new has come into a product that I already know, and I can start to leverage that and tell a different story with that product. Of course, there's fun stuff, some of the augmented reality stuff that we talked about at Ignite, and, being able to use the virtual reality headsets and stuff and attend Ignite. That very much looked cool and fun, but for me, that I don't see the business problem that necessarily solves right now for some of the organisations that I've been working with. Obviously, Azure Migrate kind of solves some of those challenges that organisations have. And it's going to be great to see where we're going with the augmented reality and virtual reality and where all that kind of stuff goes. I think last time I used one of those headsets, there was a dinosaur chasing me down a hallway, which was not a fun experience.
No, it was good fun just to see those kind of announcements from Ignite. Like you say, I mean, for me, it's about sparking that imagination and that thought of, oh, wow, okay, is it the future is here almost, it's that Minority Report kind of way of working. I think I've seen lots of tidbits of information out over the years, from quantum computing to saving data on bits of glass and lots of these things. But it's just fantastic to see where Microsoft themselves are investing their time and energy and their resources at the moment. But I mean, to bring you back to that Azure Migrate story, you're right. I mean, that's definitely an area that I work with customers, the cloud adoption framework. It's that, the way I like to frame it is that initial step into the cloud. If you're a business that really hasn't done anything, I find it hard to find any businesses these days that haven't done something with the cloud. But there certainly are a lot of businesses already out there that think, right, how do we take that first step? How do we do it in a controlled and scalable way, I guess? And that's where, all that tech that you just mentioned there. So sort of the Azure Migrate story. I mean, do you want to give a couple of minutes on that and just, what Azure Migrate is all about and how that works and how it can work for business?
Yeah, so Azure Migrate is one of those products that is free for a lot of its capabilities within Azure. So I think a lot of people forget that. So I always like to mention that top of mind. But when you are doing a migration, one of the first things that you want to do is do an inventory of your servers. You want to understand what you have in your environment, because let's be honest, we probably don't all know what's sitting in our data centers. And we want to understand as well how all those servers tie together, because you don't want to move something up into the cloud and leave something that it's dependent on down on-prem and have an issue if there's latency and stuff like that. So you really need to understand what your environment looks like. And Azure Migrate can help you with that, because no one wants to sit there and do that manual paper and pen exercise about server 1 does this, server 2 has this much RAM. So Azure Migrate can really help you do that discovery in an automated fashion and help push out some reports to give you a server count. It helps you do that analysis, so how everything hooks together, kind of things like return on investment. So if you start to leverage things like reserved instances within Azure or hybrid use benefit with some of your licensing, it can really give you some of that business case answer that you need to build up for your financial officer or your CEO or whatever in order to go forward. So it does that piece, and that's a great piece to do. And then it can obviously help you with the actual migration of it as well. It can do that. I don't like this term, but lift and shift. So it can take your virtual machines up into Azure for you. Again, no one wants to be doing that kind of transfer of it manually or whatever may be. So it can really help you with that and automate that as well. So there's lots of capabilities within Azure Migrate. That's just the kind of bare essentials, but there's things around Windows Virtual Desktops, your SQL databases. We're now starting to look at how we can help you containerize some applications into AKS on that migration path. And yeah, I just see it's continually growing and its evolution of where it's going and where the team are going.
No, I agree. There's a lot of things that have been added, and I remember using it for the first time a few years back. And compared to what you can actually get using that product now, is like you say, it's great to see that evolution of that product set and what it actually gives. And I know equally there's a plug there for partners to put certain product sets in that kind of work alongside the Azure Migrate. Because I know one of the things that was kind of missing for a while was that kind of interdependency mapping from the product, and I know parts of that have been put into feature or preview at the moment. With VMware estates or Hyper-V estates. But it's fantastic to see, and it's a product that I use on a very frequent basis with my customers. It's like you say, it's that initial assessment, right? Where are you currently when it comes to your estate. And,
Yeah.
surprisingly, a lot of business, I say not surprisingly, a lot of businesses don't really know. It's just to say it as it is. People can find themselves in all sorts of mess. So it's just great to have that kind of product set that you can kind of deploy, do some scans, do some assessments to kind of get to that point of, okay, this is where we are. Where do we want to go? So, I agree. I think just looking at those investments and those sort of enhancements and feature additions to the product is great. And I guess as anything with Azure, they're quite frequent, and you find out about them either through a big event like Ignite, or maybe there's something on the Azure Updates sort of site that gives you some heads up. I mean, in terms of obviously the whole migrate story at the moment, I know I've certainly spoken, sort of publicly a little bit around the cloud adoption framework, and that's certainly something that I point customers towards, more often than not with helping them understand this journey a bit more. Do you find you're doing that a lot with customers you speak to as well, Sarah, or because I know there's been some feature enhancements with that recently on the hybrid side of things?
So I've not been working with customers on the cloud adoption framework. I've actually been more working with the team that make it and the marketing team around helping to spread the word. So I've been hosting a show called the Azure Enablement Show, where I interview people who are SMEs or experts on the cloud adoption framework and asking them questions that customers are probably talking about, hopefully. That's the aim of the show, asking questions customers are want the answer to, and the expert is answering it and showing us where we can actually get some of that information from the cloud adoption framework. There's plans afoot to do more of that. Like you say, we released the new hybrid capabilities, or the new hybrid kind of best practices and guidance within the cloud adoption framework. So it's a great resource. It's still something that I use or reference, because there's hidden little gems inside that cloud adoption framework. Because I know probably when you looked at it, John, first time, you went, oh my God, at the amount of documentation and like, how do you absorb all of that? And it can be quite daunting when you open that up and think, oh, I've got to read all of this before I do a migration project or whatever. But there's hidden little gems within that cloud adoption framework, things like naming conventions and helping you understand whether you can use hyphens or whether you can use capital letters across all of the different things. So there's little gems of nuggets in the cloud adoption framework for everybody. And I'd say that before to a lot of people, that it can be for the techie. So there's lots of answers around how you deal with the tech, and there's also a lot of business strategy. So there's definitely something for everybody within the cloud adoption framework. So definitely don't be put off when you open it up and see the amount of information, because it's modular. It's not one of those frameworks that you follow start to finish. You can dive in depending on where you are. We've got customers who are brand new to Azure looking at it, and we've also got customers who are mature and are maybe struggling with something like cost optimization or cost management because they didn't implement it right at the start. They're now using that to try and drive the business forward with cost optimization, for example. So there's tons in there.
No, you're right. There is so much in there, but like you say, they are. I think every page is a hidden gem in its own right, because there are some, and I think it's been built up from experiences, obviously from the Microsoft product teams, speaking with customers and engineers and partners. I know that collateral's been built up over that time. So, and it's constantly getting added to now with, sort of recommendations on how you approach certain things. And I think the one thing that piqued my interest actually was that now it's including a lot about sort of the hybrid story, because I know certainly from a Microsoft point of view now, hybrid is a big term, obviously with Azure Arc, and as it happens this week, I'm on an open hack for Arc, if I can get my words out properly. But it's just great to see. I suppose sometimes, in my experience anyway, when I speak to customers, it's just understanding how you piece all of these components together, and why should I look at Azure policy? Why do I need these guide rails? Why can't I just jump in feet first and put all of my estate and infrastructure into Azure? And in some respects, you can just jump in feet first if that's what you want to do. But equally, depending on what you're looking to do, you might want to take that reserved and sort of measured approach towards it, so that you understand what you'd like. You say, if you've not put cost optimization in up front or not given it some consideration, then arguably later down the road you're kind of making a little bit more hard work for yourself maybe. And that's what the cloud adoption framework is for me. It's that list and this method of working that you might want to consider when you're approaching sort of cloud migration and transitions. But no, that's brilliant, Sarah. I mean, in terms of what next and where are Microsoft going next, I think you alluded to it earlier in terms of the announcements with Mesh. Sounds fantastic with the HoloLens and the VR stuff. I mean, what is it from your point of view? What is the next big bet in technology from your perspective, Sarah, at the moment?
To be honest, I'm going to sound really boring, but I think it is that hybrid capability that we're giving people the ability to use the cloud when they need it. That great example, or the old example that we're all used to, is that web shop that can be spun up really quick and then spun back down when you don't need it. Those capabilities, those functionalities are there for you to leverage and make the most of. And it's not just obviously the web application we've got. There's different capabilities, like you said, and making it more seamless for everybody. Because there are workloads that will never leave on-prem just due to compliance needs or legacy redundancy, and you need to make that more easier for everybody to manage. So like you said, things like Azure Arc are going to be exciting to see grow, because they'll help us give that, and again, another phrase I hate, but that one single pane of management glass that we need in order to do that. Because again, no one wants to have multiple tabs open going, right, my log files for Azure are over here, my log files for on-prem are over here. Bringing that all together and making it much more seamless for customers is where I think is going to be exciting, and being able to tell that story and weave that story properly together for customers is where I'm excited about, to be honest, John.
Yeah, and I guess just looking at it from that perspective, sometimes people might think, why would I want that single pane of glass? Why would I want to consolidate things? Well, again, not to repeat myself, but going back to that initial thing of, making your business, agile and able to innovate for your business sake, is that all of a sudden now, if you've got that methodical way of working, that centralized area that you're storing all your logs in, all of a sudden, all these other layers of stuff that you need to kind of think about, things like security and governance and compliance, all of a sudden they kind of just stack up as bolt-on modules that you can now, train and act in a kind of uniform way across your estate, which I guess, to kind of boil it down, it frees up your IT pros to a certain extent to look at other things for your business. Yeah. So, I remember, I don't know where the saying came from quite a number of years ago, actually, but that traditional sense of operations folk just in there feeding and watering servers and patching them and rebooting VMs and all that good stuff, which, look, let's face it, we've all been there and we all still are there to a certain extent. But what does that end goal look like? And I agree, that hybrid story, that ability to now use the sort of the economies of scale of cloud and all the overlay management platforms and tooling, but not just on your cloud platforms. Now you can overlay those onto all your on-prem estate and manage it in the same unified way. It is really exciting. I can't disagree with you. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out, because I think the options and the power that kind of instills and gives to business is potentially I think it's probably untapped to a certain number of companies at the moment. So I agree with you. I think that's going to be an interesting place to be. Cool. Okay. So, I mean, we've had a great chat now around, obviously, the role that you play at the moment within Microsoft, the content that you're putting together. Can we change track slightly and talk about sort of, it's similar, but onto certifications? Okay. Where are you at the minute, Sarah, in terms of certifications? Are they a good thing, a bad thing, a thorn in the side, something that you should absolutely go for? Where do you sit with that?
I enjoy doing the certifications, John. I've done them ever since Windows 7, so I'm kind of dating myself there, but that was the first one I did. And for me, they're always great consolidators, because you might know technology, but you can't really prove that to, say, a future employer. And I know there's an argument that certifications are memory tests and stuff like that, but they're a great way of showcasing you can really pass that exam and you know how to do that. So I'm a big advocate of doing the certifications. I'm just going to go through the process of renewing my Azure one. So I think I've got the architect one and the administrator one to do. And I'm still looking at the other ones, the new ones that have come out, and seeing where I can grow and expand as well. So yeah, I'm a big fan of doing them, because they help you consolidate that information and maybe fill in some gaps that you didn't even know you had, or for example, see when I did the Windows Server ones, the 2008 ones, I thought I knew everything about Windows Server. I was the big, I know what I'm doing, don't need to do this is going to be a breeze. And then I uncovered so many cool features that I could then take and actually look at fixing some of the business challenges that we had inside our organization. So you're always going to uncover wee gems like that you didn't know about and actually can actually solve some problems within your organization. So I think they're well worth doing, to be honest.
No, that's so true. I think that's true of any cert that you do. It's one of those things. I think over the years, there's been areas that I felt confident with. I think I know enough to get through the exam. But I think I've been there. I sat exams and I failed them outright. And you think, wow, okay, I clearly didn't know everything that I needed to know to get through that. And I think when you start looking into those areas that, let's face it, a lot of Microsoft products, there's certainly areas that are kind of run rate, they're day-to-day, they're used on a daily basis. But it's like, those hidden gems, as you call them, those areas of products that maybe aren't utilized by every company or every customer. When you start digging into those and doing an exam prep or some, obviously you look at the skills measured and you go through that process, you're so right. You pick up some fantastic areas, and I can't think of an exam that I've sat that I haven't kind of done that with. It's like, hang on a second, how did I not know about all of this sort of stuff? And I'm a keen believer of absolutely that, is that even when there's a release of a new exam, I will always find some time to go back over and cover off even the most basic of things that you think, well, I've been doing that for years. Because, Microsoft, the amount of updates that are coming out at the moment in lots of different areas, there's always something that's been tweaked or changed. And yeah, you can't stay on top of it all, of course you can't, but you can at least give yourself a fighting chance in those technologies. So, are there any certs at the moment, Sarah, that you're looking to start studying for, or anything that is piquing your interest on that front?
I'm actually interested in the new security ones that we saw announced at Ignite. So the security fundamentals, which isn't just a security fundamentals. When I actually looked at the skills measured, it was things like identity, 365 and Azure, and compliance. I think that fundamentals one covered. So I was like, oh, okay, I might actually have to study for this one. And then some of the other ones that have come out, I can't remember all the names of them, but there are various different ones around Azure security and how that works with Office 365 or Microsoft 365, and how those two actually, are kind of interlinked, to be honest. And I used to do 365. I used to do implementations for customers. So it would be actually a challenge in pushing me out a wee bit of my comfort zone to go back into that and see where that product has gone, because no doubt it has grown massively over the last 3 years when I've not really taken a look at it. So I think I'm going to focus on the security ones. I think there's 4 new ones that were released. I don't know if I'll be able to achieve all 4, but that's certainly kind of the area that I want to study at. And even if I just study without sitting the exams, I'm probably going to learn something and be able to share back to the community again. So yeah, that's where I'm focusing at the moment.
No, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I did see that announcement. They released those 4 exams. They do look. I mean, it seems that at the moment that the Microsoft have kind of released the roles-based authentication, roles-based certificates, exams. And for a few years now, we've had the kind of associate, the expert level and the fundamentals level certs, and it seems that Microsoft are now starting to drill down into more specific areas. I think we've got, obviously the security exams look great. I think they delve into, that cross-platform a little bit more, like you alluded to. They cover the security from, I always call it both sides of the fence, the 365 SaaS stuff and the stuff that we can do with Azure. But equally, there's things like WVD. I know we've got a beta exam of WVD, and that's certainly piqued my interest. I think when I think it's the end of the month that's coming out in beta.
Okay.
But it seems that Microsoft are starting to release now a few more of those. I don't know, is it granular the right word? But the kind of more product or feature set focused exams, rather than I think an Azure Architect expert. I think even when I sat, it was like, well, that's a broad exam. there's a lot in Azure to be an expert in. So so it's good to see. I guess I'm with you. I think over the years I've come across various different opinions where people think it's a money making thing. People think you've just got to remember a load of questions and answers. Okay, I've certainly come across those kind of people that will do that, but I think as long as you take it from the point of view of, look, if you pass an exam, that's great, but realize that it's the learnings that you get in preparing for that exam. The like you've just alluded to there, the sitting down and looking through the skills measured and really spending some time on truly understanding it, and you know, and not just trying to memorize answers to questions is clearly not going to get you very far. You've got to apply it somewhere, haven't you? And once you've got that cert, you've got to then go, well, okay, this is what we can do. So no, that's brilliant, Sarah. I think I'll probably take a little look at those security exams at some point soon. You know, like you just said there, that to-do list just grows on a daily basis at the moment, doesn't it? But I mean, to wrap things up now, Sarah, I mean, just to touch a little bit on the user group side of things. Obviously, you're the organizer of the Glasgow Azure user group at the moment, and you've been doing that for quite a while now, I think. You're on
since 2017.
Yeah, quite a few years. I mean, how's that going in the virtual world? I mean, I you know, undoubtedly you had a lot of sessions that were face to face. I mean, how do they compare and contrast now in the virtual world? You know, what are the pros and cons from your point of view?
It's given us the ability to introduce more speakers to the user group. Obviously, if it were physical, people would have to fly in, or trying to coordinate a meetup with people visiting Scotland and stuff like that was always hard. But now we've been able to open it up and have people from all over the world and deal with different time zones and stuff like that. So that's been fantastic. But I'm definitely missing the interaction of, you know, welcoming everybody into the meetup, swapping stickers, swapping stories, swapping business cards, whatever it may be, and then having that chat afterwards, maybe going to the pub or whatever with someone for a beer to chat about something else, or just, that physical connection. I don't think will ever be replaced by the virtual event. We can still share the knowledge, obviously, but the banter part of a user group is definitely missing in the virtual event. And I don't think it's something unique to the Glasgow Azure user group. I think, unfortunately, everybody's dealing with missing that social element and that banter element from their user group or conference. So yeah, that's been one negative, to be honest. But the community is still supporting the user group events, and it's good to see some of the familiar faces appear up in Teams when we have the events. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we've been able to sustain the community, and when we get back in person at some point, whenever that may be, we'll all have the same community, and we'll see the same usual faces attend again, and some new ones as well.
Yeah, you're right. I think, I joked with somebody the other day that I think I'm going to actually have to go out and buy some pens since these face-to-face events have stopped. My pen stock has gone down no end. But no, you're right. It's that whole social interaction thing, I suppose. You can't really, replace that, I don't think, with virtual. We're doing the best we can, and I guess in your role, it's about adapting to this, these strange times that we're in, and trying to find the best way to kind of put content out and engage with the community. But yeah, I agree. I think that the whole face-to-face thing, it'll be interesting to see as soon as that first event goes up how quickly that is going to fill up. I think it'll be an interesting one. Everybody will be there. So right, I'm going. But yeah, I think even just like you say, just for the picking up a bit of swag, a few stickers. I got my bit there on the shelf that you sent me there. Thank you for that one. Taking pride of place. But yeah, I think when we get back to face-to-face events, it'll be interesting. Obviously, the Welsh Azure user group, since I've been a part of it, we've not been able to run a face-to-face event. So that's going to be a whole set of new learning things for me to experience, which will be, I'm looking forward to be honest. But no, Sarah, I mean, honestly, it's been great having you on the show now. Thanks so much for giving up some of your time and just having a chat with me around a few things. We covered some great areas there. So obviously, all the links to Sarah's blog, to your YouTube channel, I'll put them all below. So everybody that's watching this now, like I say, if you're watching this, I'm surprised that you're not already following Sarah in some respects. But if you're not, go and follow Sarah, because the content you're putting out, Sarah, is fantastic. I certainly follow it as best I can in amongst all this noise of stuff that's going on at the moment anyway. But no, I mean, any parting thoughts, any parting words of wisdom that you want to offer before we wrap up the call?
I just want to say stay safe. I think stay safe, and hopefully we'll all get back in person and we can swap stickers and have a beer or a coffee or whatever it may be, and all be together again soon.
I think I owe you a few pints already anyway, Sarah, so looking forward to that first meetup. That's going to be an interesting one. But no, thanks so much for giving up your time today. Really do appreciate it, Sarah, and no doubt we'll be conversing over Twitter at some point soon.
Cool. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Sarah.